Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Can we get serious now?
One thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded and did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
In the studio today, he's joined us once or twice before. Possibly even 3 times. John Adams, who is a financial planner with Money Concepts and is the creator and co-host of Two Dudes Talk Money and Music podcast. John, welcome back to the business side of music once again.
Thank you, Bob. And I was going to say it's the first time I've ever really wanted to ask somebody what their adjectives were, but thank you.
I always try and spring new ones on him. And then also joining us today, we met at Rockin' Pod Fest. He came by our booth that John and I had and ate all of our candy that we had on the table.
And I'm going to eat some more.
And he's going to eat some more.
Right now.
I restocked it knowing it was Donovan who was coming. Donovan White is here. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate you inviting me out. And it's not far from the house, so that's great.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'm probably a mile and a half. I was somewhere else for my hair appointment, and I was like, I'm not going to...
so that doesn't come natural?
No,
okay.
It doesn't grow this way.
Yeah, mine doesn't either. John's hair length and my hair length would probably still not match your peak. I can't believe we're having a conversation about hair.
Well, you said rare hair earlier. So.
Yeah,
rare hair. Well, last story about hair, I think, but before I went in the military, mine was almost down to my shoulders when I was a kid. And ever since then, I just like it short. Huh? And a buddy of mine would always say, do you walk into a local barber and say, give me one that looks like SH? Mm-hmm. You know, and I'm like, no. But friends can say things like that to you. But anyway, I digress.
Right on. So let's talk about the music business and how you got started and all that really good stuff. Okay. How did you get started in the music business, and what were those influences?
The music side is way easier, obviously. Just had a very musical family. My mother sang all the time. Siblings played instruments. Didn't really have any cousins around or anything like that. So I'd wanted to play guitar since I was 7 or 8 when I had first saw Kiss, as I'm sure hundreds of thousands of people will say Kiss was their first.
It's interesting because that honestly seems to be the common denominator with at least everybody that we met at Rockin' Pod Fest.
Absolutely. And that was on my notes, Bob. You beat me to it. But it's probably, you know, our generation, and then the generation before us was, well, we saw the Beatles, or we saw the Stones, or we saw whomever. Whereas it was Kiss, and honestly, I knew nothing else. But I wasn't allowed to, so it was even more, and cradled in the, whatever you want to call it. I didn't listen to the radio, but when I did hear stuff on the radio, I immediately thought that was Kiss. Or wherever I went, and it was just up at a friend's house. We painted our hockey sticks. I was raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in St. Louis Park.
Okay, so I have to ask you real quick. Were you a hockey player?
Yes.
You almost have to be by birth in Minnesota.
Very much so. Yeah. As well as learn to skate at 3 and, you know, go home crying because your feet are frostbitten and you're skating home because the streets are covered in ice, which was great.
So it's interesting, when we moved from California to Tennessee, it has totally nothing to do with the music business, but my boys wanted to play hockey. They just thought that they didn't want to play baseball. They didn't like basketball. They definitely didn't want to do football, but they liked hockey. They had never played hockey. They had actually never really skated. My youngest son picked up skating pretty darn quick, and he was a wild man on the ice. Now, my older son, not a great skater, so they made him goalie. So it turned out that my older son was the goalie and my younger son was his defenseman. My younger son spent more time in the penalty box than any other kid in that league.
And that was probably just brother aggression or like definitively, I want to protect my brother?
Protect his brother to no end, yeah.
Okay.
And it'd be funny, because I was coaching and I didn't know anything about hockey, but I remember hearing a whistle blowing one day, and I turn and I look, and the stick's down and the gloves are off. You know, my son at that point, he was 10, 11, 12 years old, and he's just wailing on this other kid because he body checked into, his brother, the goalie.
And that can be broken down to two types of hockey players. The finesse ones, a la Gretzky, a la Brett Hull, a la whomever, and then all the other thugs who just body check, hit stuff. And I was finesse, and I hated the bully, hated the getting hit and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So then I moved to basketball. So that was less contact, but could still finesse. And, I did my first 5K when I was 6 in Minneapolis.
Holy cow.
Yeah. Ran all my life till about 4 years ago. And then with 4 or 5 sports on 45 plus years, it's just taking a toll.
Plus being a musician.
Yeah. Where the pliability and the flexibility is super needed. And sometimes the athleticism, which I enjoy greatly. That's one of my favorite parts. So to get started, it was almost as if the music started at an early age, always had it. And those layers of the brain that said, okay, you can sing, you can hum, you can do this. Mother tried to start me on piano lessons, and she said, you get 3 years. At the end of 3 years, then you can play guitar. That 3 years did not happen until I was 18, as in I didn't even play the piano for 3 years. I just started playing guitar when I was 18.
Right.
When grandmother had passed, she'd left me a couple guitars, and I was like, I'm just going to do this, whether I get to or I'm allowed to or not. So that's where the music started.
We had a similar, trust me, I'm not a professional musician, but I was made to take piano lessons when I was 5. And my teacher told my mom, she said, John might be the best I've ever had at this age, but don't bring him back. Because I was a brat. I wanted to play, I'm a little older, I wanted to play guitar. I was, when I was 5 years old, it was 1967. And I wanted to be a Beatle. And I didn't see them lugging a piano around. Plus, she drank. I could smell, and I'd say, Mom, what's this grape juice smell on Miss Embleton? So that's part of the reason I was not invited back. But anyway, that's the last of our musical similarities, right. I think.
Well, and at that, it's down to, at an early age, for that first start, to get someone to translate, all right, here's why the piano works, and this is why it would make guitar work. That was never told to me.
It's the founding block or the building block of it all.
It is. I mean, and it creates this linear mapping that you can see. This is how music works, literally left to right, up, down, whatever it is, versus something like a trumpet or a trombone, where those things are just kind of like, here's a combination that makes this note, these 3 buttons, or the way you slide this here. And that's probably what propelled me later in mid-20s to start teaching music. And where I really wanted to, hey, you know what? I need to reprocess my own brain and figure out how this works, because I knew nothing.
And you brought up a valid point. I think when you talk about trumpet or trombone or woodwind instruments, it's all singular note. Piano, guitar, you're playing chord structures, or you can play a few notes at the same time because you've got more to work with than you do with a brass or a woodwind. But teaching guitar, you said you started taking lessons at 18, or you started playing at 18?
I started playing. I was self-taught.
So you were self-taught. And at what point did you say, yeah, I can pass this on, I can start teaching?
It was probably, much like anything in a career choice, necessity, where my son was just born. We were struggling per se, but it was just like, I need to do something with whatever knowledge I have. I want to keep playing music, but how does this schedule fit in? All right, wife is an editor of a medical journal, so like career there, great. But during the day, I was a stay-at-home dad, so I would stay at home with them, and then I would go teach, and then for a while, redid a house for 5 years. So it would be stay-at-home dad, do a house, go teach in the evening, and then go work for a family member till 2 or 3 in the morning, and then start that cycle over the next day for about 5 years.
Wow.
And poorly managed money, very poorly. But it was more of a, I think the key founding block I missed was, all right, here's money. Here's what you can do to further an education or further a financial security or further a house, which the house did. We flipped the house in 5 years. I did everything in that house myself. Floors, roofs, walls, all the walls, interior and exterior.
Were you living in the house?
I was living in the house at the same time while 2 kids, because then my daughter came along very soon after. And it was, all right, I'm doing all this. Okay, we'll get a chunk of money and be able to get to the next house, that kind of thing. And it was just one of those, all right, I'm just going to get through this. This is what we're going to do. Because I didn't prefer school. I liked the social aspect. And some people say, oh, you should go to college. Well, I did for 2.5 years at 3 different schools. Didn't necessarily want to be at the college per se, but just wanted all the people around.
Right, that social interaction.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where I could learn, oh, that guy plays this, that guy does this. Now I can play. Oh, we made a band, we did this. All right, blah, blah, blah.
That was me in college. I signed up for 3 classes. Back in those days, one of them was typing. You know, you didn't have computer keyboards, but typing.
QWERTY youth.
and the other 2 was music theory and chamber orchestra, because I was a bass player and I played upright bass. And, you know, the music theory and the chamber orchestra were both evening classes, and the typing class was like middle of the afternoon. So people saw me coming and going, and yeah, I was not a big schoolie.
I think a lot of folks are realizing college isn't for everybody now, too, just because, you know, you've heard so much about the forgiveness of student loans and so many people are in substantial debt. And when I went to school, it was after 4 years in the service, and I probably couldn't have gone to school right out of high school. I probably wasn't disciplined enough, but had the pleasure of taking a couple of great classes, one on filmmaking, where the teacher said your ideas, we did these with Super 8mm too. This is a long time ago.
Yeah, I love that.
And he was like, your ideas are great, man, but you don't have any business behind the camera, because we had to manually sound stripe everything. Right. But another class I really remember was big band jazz. And we just listened to jazz for 45 minutes, 3 times a week. And the teacher just, all you do is name the songs, and half the people couldn't do that. So I fell in love, believe it or not, the Stan Kenton group, because I love trombones and Benny Goodman and things like that, which is really well outside of my normal wheelhouse for music.
Right.
But college is still a drag. Anyway, enough about that. We don't want to depress our listeners.
Well, I think what your focus of the injection there was probably, you can get a trade without college. And honestly, there are probably, if we've taken our examples from certain large personalities and large financial or gurus in the tech world, even going to college may hinder you because your desire is to do certain things. And whether that be music or film or listening to music or house repairing or construction, whatever it is, those aspects far too long have been pressed into, well, you should sit in a room for 6 hours a day again.
Well, you don't need to have a college degree to do what I do. You have to pass the licenses to sell securities and things like that. Now, a lot of the bigger firms will want that as a screening process, but a lot don't. So I think people, college is important for way too much info for folks today, but my son-in-law is a doctor. Just graduated from medical school about a year and a half ago. You need college for that. You need that training.
And as a patient, you would prefer that they had that college.
To sell windows or aluminum siding, you don't need a business degree. Right. Come on.
Or teach guitar or host a podcast.
Or, I mean, it's the differentiation of street smarts and book smarts.
Right.
I've been street smart since whenever on the quote-unquote streets of St. Louis Park, Minnesota. But it was all about, all right, how do I interact with these people? How do I do this? How do I gain something without feeling like I'm putting one over on them or them on me? Which it was far too easy to put one over on me because I was naive and gullible.
And I think the other thing is creative people. And we've talked about film and music and writing. Those are all creatives. A lot of them don't really have, I'm going to say it, they don't have good financial sense.
Not at all.
Oh, I made $100 tonight? Great, let's go down to the store.
That's a new guitar pedal.
Yeah. And
or a bag of chocolate.
Or a bag of chocolate. And that is our mindset for the most part. And it's really In all the years with all the artists that I've worked with, I'm going to say 2%, 3% were the ones that had the business sense. The rest of them were, let's hit the stage and play some music and have some fun. That's a tough go, especially the day you wake up and the career is maybe behind you and you go, oops, I didn't put any money away for retirement. I guess I'm going to go flip houses, or something along those lines.
And in the era you were thriving, we're just going to call it thriving, but like most interacting with those things, would you say that the labels, because labels are also almost a thing of the past, there still are, but it's more of when you were interacting and dealing with those, was that almost handed off from the creative to the business of the label and just basically like, oh, okay, you take care of it, label, or you do all that, and then you're just a bank loan to me, and they didn't understand that? Is that where it mostly fell?
That is a perfect analogy of what you just said, in that what a lot of artists don't understand is when you sign that recording contract, it's a bank loan. They're not necessarily giving you the money, but they're fronting all of the expenses for your career. The other thing is it has become, and what you've said, the record label today is not the record label it was 5 years ago, let alone what it was 20 years ago. We're not selling the content that we used to. We don't have the physical product out there anymore. It's all streaming, which is, 1/100th of a cent versus, where you can make a few bucks off of an album. And I think that the artist, and especially back then, they would negotiate and cut deals that made absolutely no sense. Now, when you look at the infrastructure of a record label, you got the promotions people, you got the A&R people, you got the artist development people, which I was the artist development guy. And then you had what we lovingly, affectionately called success prevention. And those were the accountants and those were the attorneys. We would have really good ideas on how to create a project, how to produce it, how to promote it, how to market it. And the bean counters would go, yeah, we don't see a return on that investment. Where's the ROI? And then legal would step in and they go, you're setting yourself up for a lot of liability there. Well, great. What can we do? Well, just get out and perform and, sell records. And they made it sound easy, but it wasn't. On a good day, it wasn't.
Would you say that's flipped back to, I've heard the philosophy brought to, it's back to mid-50s, early 60s of, we're going to let you do a song, and if that song does well, we're going to do another song, singles business, and then another song you can do well. As well as they've lopped off any real kind of A&R. Because, I'm looking at certain instances of bands, obviously huge now. In the 80s, they developed great fandom. But how many people really know how many albums Journey put out before it became hit-worthy? And who that lineup was? And who the A&R guy was that sold it well enough to let that keep happening. And, okay, now, hey, it's 2 more albums out of them. Really, guys, it'll be fine.
Well, back in those days, once again, you had artist development. You took the time to create and nurture. A lot of people don't realize that the band Foreigner was not a band initially. It was one cat who had a record deal, and they said, well, let's put a band behind you, and we'll call it Foreigner, and, we'll see what kind of success you have. Where it's flipped in today's world is the independent artist can now have success with or without a record deal, because that whole distribution dynamic has gone away. We're not dealing with the 26 major retail record stores that we used to have to.
Or we call them tons of middlemen.
Yes, exactly.
Between the performing artist and the consumer. Whereas how many steps before I can actually listen to that album?
The big difference here is the number, that numerical sequence of what is considered success is a lot lower standard than it was 20 years ago. 20 years ago, you sold 1 million albums and you went, great. Now I only have to sell 1 million more to pay for the first 1 million because the record label had invested so much money in you. Now's the independent artist because you have recorded in your garage or your bathroom or a studio like this, and you've done all your mixing and mastering and editing and all of that good stuff, and then you put it out there one song at a time. It becomes more of a trickle-down economic, but it's also very longer self-sustaining because you now don't have all of those middlemen in the process. We're going to take a break, get a word in for one or two of our sponsors, and when we come back, we're going to have some more conversation with our guest Donovan White and John Adams.
How are you? This is Freddie Salem of The Outlaws, and you're listening to The Business Side of Music.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
As a musician, you have a dream, that vision of what success looks like for you. Though it's not only about the money, money is part of it. Whether you've been extremely successful or you're just striving to maintain a regular cash flow, you need a plan. Money Concepts can help you develop a customized plan to achieve the financial stability and success you want. For over 40 years, Money Concepts has been providing holistic financial planning services to individuals, families, and business owners. As an independent firm, Money Concepts and their associates are committed to always represent the best interest of the client. It's really about a committed, benevolent interest in them personally. This independence, coupled with that committed, benevolent interest, means they represent you, the client, not a product supplier. It's not about selling products, it's about helping you achieve success. To learn how this can benefit you, contact my buddy, John Adams, with Money Concepts at 737-867-9309. That's 737-867-9309. You can also email John at jadams@moneyconcepts.com.
Hey, this is Jack Sharkey, host of Between the Notes. Take a break from all the turmoil in the world and join us each week as we explore the magic, mystery, and beauty of music. Between the Notes, a podcast dedicated to everything music, available everywhere you get your podcasts.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
Back in the studio here on The Business Side of Music with John Adams, who's a financial planner with Money Concepts and the host of Two Dudes Talk Money and Music podcast, along with an all-around nice guy, house fixer-upper, guitar guru, and the guy who eats all the chocolates in our studio here today, Donovan White. Donovan, let's pick up where we left off, if you don't mind.
How do you take that to financiers? Because so many of them, not myself, because I am creative, I write stuff, I record stuff, I do demos, but I'm really not pushing towards that horizon again, towards a, career as a solo artist or whatever it may be. Even, some bands approach and say, hey, we're doing this. We've got great videos. We've got great songs. You really do. But I hate to say it, I am at an age where that's probably not the best for me to start at zero. I'm going to need, I know my field. I want to tour. I want to play. I want to do this. I need to set this up. I'm a side man. I'm a gun. I'm a hired gun. I'll be your right-hand man. Great. If you've got that going. But how do you sell that? How do you financially propose to an artist and to a whatever's left of record people? How do you substantiate and say, this is actually going to work? It's the greatest conundrum for any artist now who puts out great content, who puts out hundreds and thousands of streams, but cannot flip that and make that switch go to the next level.
You have to treat it more as a boutique business and a niche business. You're not going to make money on streaming. You're just not. And I don't think you can take that to a financial person and say, hey, I've got 1 million streams. Great. How much did that make you? Maybe $800. Okay. But if you start taking those 1 million streams and you turn those into fans, and we've talked about this on a couple other different podcast shows, translating the casual fan to a rabid fan, or what you would call a super fan. They're going to buy all your music. They're going to buy all your merch. They're going to go to all of your shows. You start growing that incrementally. And now you can start seeing, okay, I'm playing a lot of house concerts, couch concerts, whatever you want to call them. I'm playing a lot of smaller venues, coffee clubs, bars, but I'm playing my original music. Maybe it's a mix with some covers, some standards. But you're now starting to create a physical trail of a revenue stream from money that you're making off all that merch. And performance fees, appearance fees. Now you have something that's got, I would think, at least, and John can correct me if I'm wrong, but now you've got a little bit of equity. You're showing a little bit of a track record, but it's not going to happen overnight. You've got to really get out there and hustle.
Well, to me, I'm thinking it ties into that dirty 5-letter word brand. You're developing your brand.
Can I ask you real quick, why do you think it's dirty? We'll get to that part later.
Everybody says it, that's all.
Okay.
I really don't think it's a dirty word.
Okay.
But one of the things that got me into this portion of my business, working with people in the music industry, creatives and their friends, is I'm no longer affiliated with a couple of folks, but we were doing this together based off of Duff McKagan trying to start a wealth management firm years ago. Now, I've never met Duff. I've met his business partner. But one of the things I'm still trying to do, and we were doing, is trying to get people like yourself, musicians, to think about themselves as, we didn't call it a brand, but it technically is a brand. Think about how you can monetize not just your music, but other things you have an interest in while you're in the public eye. So, for example, not naming names, but a gentleman from my hometown's bass player and band leader for one of the biggest acts in the world. And when he's not on stage, he's out in the woods with a bow and arrow. And he's got a relationship with vendors that do that. Just things like that. We had another guest, Jake Johnson, we were talking about. He knows Doc McGee. And I had the privilege of sitting in Doc's office one day for about 3.5 hours. I don't think I said 3 words. I just listened. And we got to talking about branding and things like that. And he reluctantly admitted it was part of what the business is becoming. But I'll never forget, too, he said, you need to remember where your bread is really buttered. This kid said, Doc, I got a great new T-shirt. Can you get me in Target? He said, why don't you write a decent effing song? How's that? That's what we'll do. But anyway, I know I'm kind of contradicting myself, but developing yourself as a brand, and you have different tentacles or different revenue streams. And that's one of the things, with folks I'm talking to, trying to get them to do and build a team of creatives and things like that, the board of directors and things that will even help.
You just mentioned a word that I think we often overlook, and that's tentacles. And that's really that hub and branching out. So, I want to reach new people. I don't have a lot of money. What can I do? Okay, well, you can put your music on YouTube and all of the other social platforms. Write a blog. Create some kind of other dynamics. I've got a buddy here in town who is a hit songwriter. Guy's written multiple #1 hits. Well, that and $5 will get you a cup of coffee at Starbucks today. So he writes a daily blog, and he has 10,000 followers who pay him X number of dollars a month to follow his blog. So now his music career is self-sustaining because his blog is self-sustaining.
That's the whole point. For example, a working musician, one of the things when I first started coming to Nashville, I was surprised by how little a working musician was paid, frankly. I thought that everybody, if you're running around in Vertical Horizon, or if you're playing with Gene Simmons and his side band, that you'd be banking it. Now, I'm not saying that that's not the case with some people, but that was surprising. That and trust me, I don't want to see your W-2s, your 1099s or anything.
No. I mean, we could go into horror story level, but we don't need to do that. I think people who know me kind of know. Yeah, this is
you want to be able to
difficult.
sustain your creative self, and to do that, you can branch tentacles, use tentacles, develop different revenue streams and things like that. And I think that's critically important because there's only one Garth Brooks right now, and great, he's got tons of money, but most people that work with him or are in this industry aren't paid that well. How's that, Bob? Is that dancing around it pretty good?
No, I think it's accurate. When you say Garth Brooks, another perfect example is Taylor Swift, who was just here in Nashville on her Eras tour. What was mind-blowing for me was the number of semis and flatbed trailers and buses that were hauling that production around. I'm talking 90 to 100 semis, probably half of that in tour buses, a week or more setup in a stadium, and then a 2 or 3 day teardown to go into the next city. Not every artist is going to be able to sustain that. Okay, you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't even think Garth Brooks could sustain that. Taylor Swift is the 1% of 1%. Okay, so just, years ago, I met with a couple artists who wanted to develop their career, and I asked them, I said, what's your goal? And they said, well, our goal is we want to buy a Learjet and have our dad fly us to the gigs. It's like John said, well, forget about the T-shirt. Create some hit songs first.
Right.
So you have...
Say buy a Powerball ticket every now and then, too. But that's not endorsed by my broker-dealer, by the way, that advice.
So you have to create those revenues, those avenues of streams, and it may not all be music-related. I mentioned my buddy Reggie Ham, who's the hit songwriter, who does the blog. And not all of his blog posts are music-related. Some of them might be based on politics, societal issues, family circumstances, religion, whatever. But you create something that people want, and then you tie your music into it.
You could do one on building and remodeling a home, for the love of God. I mean, you've done it. Sure. And maybe throw a song in while you're doing it.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm an expert on it, but I'm definitely experienced.
But people don't want an expert, Dave, because
that's true. I believe. Would you say
I painted my own house? Would you like to look at it?
Yeah.
It's surely not done by an expert.
You could even take what you've done and pitch something like that to HGTV or one of those networks.
Well, and that's how. Would you say people like from Backstreet Boy or NSYNC or what's his name?
Right, I know
New
you're
Kid
talking
on the
about.
Block.
Yeah.
So that's how they tie into their new brand stuff. So, I still have the shirts. Anyway,
I don't. I have the tour badge.
They sold me the shirt. I didn't. The songs were okay, but I love it now. Like now, I saw a fabulous country boy band the other night at Whiskey Jam. I was like, I want to play for you guys because I love this stuff. The hardest part was, as probably if you said you were learning, sorry about that, as you were learning, the players they're not making anything. Starting out, I think I had my first band when I was 21. As everybody at your 21, you're not thinking anything but, I just want to do this. I have my job, and then I'm just doing this other thing. And then it became, I started teaching music. Well, then 28, 29, 30, a bunch of interest for my songs from Sony and Tim McGraw's manager and those kinds of things. I was in a country band and doing that for a while. And that was, this is this could really happen. The brass ring is right there. And something goes amiss.
Yep.
Another instance where another, not huge artist by any means, but was on a very large label. And I put in several years and wrote and recorded and all right, this is the next one. Oh, Lord. That guy has blown everything up himself. It's time to move on. And then another one. There comes a point, when do you think is the average age when somebody realizes, I need to make this the thing, or even a mindset, I need to make this the thing and just be doing a certain way, or I need to go back to trade or school or job or whatever. Because I'm still learning that line.
No, I don't think there is. I've been in this business 50 years now.
What would you say is the average by the time they bail?
I'm probably not a good judge of that because
probably when they have kids and
usually when they have kids.
That'd be my guess.
Well, you would think so, but I have 5 kids and I didn't get off the road. Maybe that was selfish on my part.
If you knew my kids, it wouldn't.
But your career field, it was quote unquote successful.
But it changed constantly.
Yeah.
I went from being a stagehand to being a roadie to being a promoter rep to being a tour manager and a production manager to being a label guy to being back in the concert promotion business to running a couple facilities, which, any one of those at any given time will implode on you and did in my world. And you pick yourself up and you dust yourself off and you say one of two things. I'm going to keep doing this because I love it. You have to be, first of all, in the music industry, in the creative world, you have to be passionate about what you do.
That is beyond perceptive because there are plenty of friends who are my age who, quote unquote, started as musicians, quote unquote musicians, hobbyists, or whatever it is. And for myself, that passion, that like it would be there would be physical mutation if I were not playing music, as in it would just drain me. My soul would leave, whatever it is. How do you then tell that kid, that person, you could, because you were in all those fields?
I think you have to reset yourself. You have to hit that restart button every once in a while. There was a time in my career I took almost 2 years off and managed a restaurant. And I'm going to tell you, those 2 years managing a restaurant was literally the best 6 weeks of my life. And then after that, I was absolutely miserable. And fortunately got a phone call one day to go back out on the road and took it. But I think that as long as you can sustain a financial income to take care of your family, I think that's vitally important, and not get quagmired down into debt. You know, oh, gee, I'll just use this credit card to pay this bill this month. John will tell you that's a death knell right there. And so I think if you love what you do enough, that's where you have to start diversifying. And you brought it up.
And someone like John steps in and says, we can diversify this.
Well, I think that the guy who does the TV show on Magnolia Network or HGTV, that he's in New Kids on the Block, he still gets out there and performs. Now, that's a bit of an extreme, but flipping houses and performing music, I've seen a lot of people on these home remodel homes or flipping homes. They're musicians. You know, they're singer-songwriters. They're creative people, but they found a way to get the exposure that they need by doing that in order to sustain their music. I think if we look at it as, remember what I said, the two artists that came to me that wanted to make enough money to buy a Learjet so their dad could fly, you got to have that reality check pretty early on in your life.
Very much so.
Kind of tied to what Bob said before the Learjet comment was, it's basically you have priorities, but you can, you still want to sustain yourself. And just in case you're not that Garth Brooks we mentioned or Taylor Swift, you can still find a way to make a living and still be creative and do what you're born to do. I think that's important.
I agree. I think you getting out there and doing what you love to do and finding out a way to make it successful, albeit not at the Taylor Swift or the New Kids or the Garth Brooks level, you still, if it can be self-sustaining in combination with something else that you do, and
do that home remodeling show to promote your music line,
and maybe that
a lot of plays,
Oh, and believe me, I'm not asking for myself. Truly, I'm not.
You're asking for a friend.
It's more of a rhetorical.
Yeah.
If I'm asking for myself, saying I'm asking for a friend, I am mean myself. But yeah, there's a whole contingency. It never ceases to disturb me. It even happened the other night because there's almost a bully system where a bunch of people move to a town or a place or the next blah, blah, blah. 5 years ago, one of the 3 or 4 times I'd moved back to Nashville, and a guy was just like, so what do you do? And I'm like, well, I do such and such and such and such. And he's like, well, you should probably go home. Oh, you already think you have me figured out or whatever. That's not how this works.
Yeah.
I do what I do. And the other night it was like a songwriter at Live Oak. And he's like, I came in from, I think he came in from Montana and was playing a few songs. He's like, I've contemplated moving here. And just some yahoo in the crowd goes, don't, we're full. Well, you're not helping anything with your arrogance there. But at the same time, that will, for someone like me, just kind of thumb my nose, flip the fingers and say, oh, I'll show you now.
I'm calling a realtor now.
Exactly. And that is probably what has pushed me to better circumstances and more success from certain failures around the turn of the century kind of thing. I lucked out. I knew a guy who said, all right, this band's looking for someone. Okay, great.
Is that how Vertical Horizon came about?
That was like, I'd worked for a guy around the turn of the century, and his sound man, a very dear friend of mine, 10 years later was like, oh yeah, by the way, now I'm working for this other artist. Would you be interested in playing? I'm like, yeah, I would love to do that. He's like, okay, he'll call you, blah, blah. He calls and says you're interested. I'm like, yeah, great. And he goes, okay, if you'd like to play New Year's Eve, and he called around Thanksgiving. If you'd like to play New Year's Eve in Alaska, here's 15 songs. We'll see you there. No audition. Didn't even see me play. Didn't do anything. He just trusted. Word of mouth. How strong now? Well, in 10 years later, it was time. It was done. But how strong now in the financial game? Because book smart is one thing. So this goes back to the book smart, street smart. I was street smart enough to handle with the sound guy and do this and network and be friendly and constantly. Financially, can you just put numbers down paper-wise? And this isn't for me as well. This is, for the next artist who wants to, chuck something up. The long half-court shot. Can you express, how would you tell someone in layman's terms, here's the numbers, here's the stuff, this company will do this or this company will not do this, but by word of mouth, who that can legitimately say, yeah, his experience is the best, or that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. You understand what I'm questioning?
Talking about like a coaching referral?
Well, almost a coaching referral, but someone comes to you.
A mentorship?
A position of, all right, we're just going to call him Jerry in accounting. Jerry in accounting says, if you do this and do this, or, this will succeed. And that's not a musician, that's whomever. And you can actually put square numbers to some, like you can legitimately say the return on this has always been this, 2.5%. How hard is that then for you with the creative to sell that?
Actually, that's really not what I would do. And I think I'm going to mention something I'm pretty sure I've heard Bob say is when someone's getting started like that, the first thing you tell them is find an accountant. And that's where you start building that relationship and up talking about, okay, we need to budget that. You might want to incorporate, you might want to do different things, but you set up your income flow and your expenses and your tax deductions and things like that. And then once you're rolling a little bit, you talk to somebody like me. Now, my motto's always been, I don't care how much money someone has, I'm happy to talk to them and help them if they're nice. Period. But I think the first, I know I'm really not answering your question the way you phrased it.
Totally. And my phrasing could be off.
But I don't think there's a rule of thumb out there for this will yield you this return on this hypothetical investment. It's always good to invest in yourself and it'll pay dividends eventually. But I don't think there's a rule of thumb that says after X amount of weeks or months or years, you'll yield this much based on this activity, because a lot of success I've noticed in your business is luck. There's a lot of great musicians out there, but just being in the right place at the right time.
We're going to take another break here. When we come back, we're going to have some more conversation with our guest, Donovan White, and John Adams from Money Concepts.
Hey, this is Martin Motnick from Accept, and you're listening to The Business Side of Music.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
Whether you consider yourself a musician or not, music is all around us, and it affects our everyday lives. Whether it's background music influencing our shopping habits in a store, organ music adding the vibe to a baseball game, or a playlist convincing us to keep going on that last mile of a run. I'm Mindy Peterson, host of the podcast Enhance Life with Music, where we take a holistic look at music's benefits through the lens of science and medicine, entertainment, and business. You can find me and Enhance Life with Music at mpetersonmusic.com/podcast or wherever you get your audio.
When you have a Korg synth at your fingertips, the possibilities are endless. Be it digital, analog modeling, altered FM, wave sequencing, or the multi-engine synth, Korg gives you easy access to a variety of features to help you get the perfect sounds quickly. Whether you're a professional musician or just starting out, Korg truly has a synthesizer to help you express yourself. Visit Korg.com or your favorite Korg dealer to get your hands on one of their products to create new music always. Korg, the official sponsor of the Business Side of Music.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
I think you said something earlier that I want to get back to. First of all, I want to preface that by saying I read an article the other day that said, did you know that in the United States alone, 29% of teenagers cite being, quote unquote, a YouTuber as their chosen profession or intended profession. That's the mindset. 29% of teenagers think that they can make their money being an influencer on YouTube. Okay, so now let's go to street smarts versus book smarts. You've been in the business a few decades.
Yeah.
Not as long as an old goat like me, but you've been in the business for a few decades. You have a value there just in that alone. You know all those mistakes we make, guys like you and I in this business? Oh, crap, I did that. That just cost me whatever. That's a value to that next generation who may or may not have a lot of money, but for them, it's an education that they can't buy in school. You can go to UCLA, you can go to USC, you can go to Vanderbilt, you can go to Belmont. You can take all those music business classes, and that's not going to get you in the driver's seat. It's really not.
Because it's not a magic formula.
No.
I call it scar tissue. You've got scar tissue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, that's maybe where an individual who's got some history, has got some experience, has got some chops.
Maybe a podcast, What Not to Do.
Yeah, maybe a podcast on What Not to Do. That'll be one of my episodes.
What hasn't gotten me arrested yet? Or
Could you almost frame the two, because there's the creative, the street smart, and then the book smart. Could you almost frame, because it just kind of scanned through my brain, and this is how it works. Musician creative side is very much almost a gradient system or a graded system. Like, that wasn't as good as it could have been. It didn't really pass muster, but I can keep going. I can, that was great. Things keep going.
Here's 15 songs I want you in Alaska for New Year's Eve, because we knew you can do it.
Right. And even then, I know I didn't play them the greatest or didn't fit certain things, but things can be molded and shaped. Versus what I'm hearing, and I'm loving to hear this part because it needs to be stressed to young people all the time, especially in elementary school. Financial is almost broken down to pass-fail. Everything, the pass rate is near, you do any kind of investment, you do any kind of put this little bit in there, you're going to step up. And I don't just mean financially, but like even musically or whatever. And there's the memes going around. By the way, the coffee is kicking in, so it's going to be great. It's going to go.
That's my life.
The memes going around of, why did I learn about square dancing in this and this class when I should have been learning how to get my taxes right or how to get this financial right. And what I hoped I passed on, I know their mother passed on to the kids. She's amazing that way, where it was, okay, this is book smart. I need this book smart out of you. Be creative. Do that. And I didn't even really have that much influence. They just started and did it. And it was just encouragement, good. Discouragement, bad.
Well, you're talking about really an indictment on the school systems in general in the country. And my wife's a teacher, actually, and she's a business teacher. And where she's teaching, actually, this past year, they dropped the accounting classes to teach people like how to be influencers and things, marketing. And she raised hell because she was department head. She resigned.
How to balance your quote unquote checkbook, even though we don't have those anymore.
We don't teach. I believe we need to teach a lot of different things, but we need to prioritize what's going to get you through. And that is balancing your checkbook and having real discussions about debt and things like that. I think nationwide, I can surely speak for my counties around where I live, we don't do it enough. Common sense will eventually prevail, I think, but after how many generations?
I think you have this mindset out there of nobody knows how to put a budget together. What's your monthly living expense? Well, I don't know. Well, put all your expenses together, and you need to be making that much money a month. I actually had someone say to me once that, well, you just tell me how much money you're making and I'll put my budget on that, based on that. And I'm like, that makes absolutely no sense at all. And especially in our industry, because, our income is not constant every month. It's up and down and in and out and, sideways and backwards. I'm going to get back to what I said earlier, and that is you have to really start becoming multi-leveled revenue streaming creating. And whether it's flipping houses or writing blogs or writing music or performing or consulting for that next generation out there or doing a podcast or whatever it is, that's how you start creating that revenue stream and at the same time continue to do what you love to do.
Agreed. because that's how next phase, when I was off the road, I would be consulting churches on how to make their worship teams better.
Right. Which is, let me tell you, badly needed.
Oh, definitively. And it's down to literally the book smart of the budget of the church.
They need help with their music selection.
Yes.
I didn't say that.
Yeah,
No, but you're right. They do.
It is 100% down to the finance department going, well, I don't know if we should spend on that. I'm like, I'm literally asking you for 1/5 of what you would pay an actual quote unquote full leader. I'm going to come in and consult for 6 months and set this up for you and then teach them to teach themselves. That's how I've always approached teaching students for guitar. I'm laying this foundation of, I want you to learn that this does this, and the reason why this does this is because it will always do this. And when you can start teaching yourself, and I see you're teaching yourself, and you're exceeding, and you're probably going to pass me at some point, I'm not going to take your money anymore, and I'm going to tell your parents that that kid's fine. What you need to do is have him involved in this or involved in this.
I was at dinner last night with a buddy of mine from back home who lives down here, and thought of a story. He's a pretty good guitar player, and you talking about being you said your student may eventually pass you. I can't remember the guy's name. He's in New Orleans, and he's calling a buddy, and he says, one of my students is probably the best guitar player in the world right now. And he was talking about Kenny Wayne Shepherd when he was like 18.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, he's so good, and I just tell him what to do, and he acts like I'm in charge. And I'm like, that's got to be kind of thrilling. I want to smack him at the same time, but it's awfully proud.
Yeah, there's parental moments where, some students, well, especially I was teaching at the college level for a while, and tons of kids would come in like, I've used YouTube. I'm like, yeah, but all right, now go stand. Yeah, go stand in front of 40 people with their arms crossed and staring you down. They're your best friends, but let's see how you do with that. Let's see how you can stand. And in the realm of all the things performance, could not pull it off. I mean, the freezing, and I'm not touting my tactic, but it was literally down to kids showing up. Oh, I know everything. I don't want to sound like an old fuddy-duddy with everybody thinks they know everything right now. I would love to be involved with tons of people I would like to know more about that. And how do I do that? That's why I ask it in certain ways like that with you guys.
They're out there. It's just you having to find them and them having to find you. And once that gets out there and you have a couple within your system, within your wheelhouse, it starts growing exponentially. And it just takes time. That's all.
Yeah. And it's mostly a challenge as well. As many times as I've been here, as many players as I've played with or bands I've toured with, there aren't a lot of extenders. One's willing to draw in someone new or from outside their circle and to bring them to, just come shadow me. And I don't mean that like in a blah, 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 but hey, just come hang out with us. I would challenge a lot of musicians because financially, yeah, you're going to get interns. You're going to get the ground level people coming in and going, all right, blah, blah. But is there much of a shadow system where they're like, I don't mean like hanging out with the Jerrys at Buffalo Wild Wings after a huge sale. I mean, specifically, here's a day-to-day that's going to help you a lot more and not just internship, but they're already ingrained in the system, but they need a little more street smarts and not even sales tactics. Is there that system for you to pull those along like that? And I mean specifically you. Do you get to do that?
As part of what I do, it's a little different than, say, a guy you're going to meet at Merrill Lynch. I work with a national company called Money Concepts. That's what you call a broker-dealer for those out there in podcast land. And with my charge, I have a practice, what we call practice, a book of business, where the majority of it's just folks from back home and around that general area that, we're retirees, work at the local chemical plant or the power station or own a small business. Part of my practice is working with folks in the music space. Now, you say, well, that's not what I asked. Well, the reason I mentioned all that and then talk about Money Concepts is part of my charge is with my title with them, something called a regional director, where I do develop a team of advisors. So if I do mentorship, and often it's with people that are just trying to learn about the business. Now, I don't have them shadowing me, but we'll do periodic calls. And a lot of times I bring those people in the business and I'll pay to get them started, get their licensing and things like that, and gradually teach them how to do this. But I'll say, hey, it's a straight commission job. You're not on a salary, because that's how I started. So make sure, if you need to have a second job or something like that, kind of like what we've talked, make sure you can sustain yourself while you learn this business. So I think that's sort of what you asked.
Yeah.
Hey, but we don't want to keep you all day, but real quick.
I'm here all day because there's a bowl of chocolate with my name on it.
We want to talk a little bit about, I think
Ask me anything.
You lived in Kansas City, and then you came here, and I want to talk about some of the bands you were in. You can mention them by name if you want to, and kind of what you listen to, because that's my deal with Bob. I got to talk a little music, and I'm happy to report we've talked a lot of business today, and it was very good, but I want to talk some music too.
Okay. All right. Chocolate goes in, mouth keeps running. So, moving into my 30s, again, that was turn of the century. I was playing a lot of country music, loved it, on the table with Tim McGraw's manager. He loved my songs. The band was willing to do them, which is incredibly rare. So I lived in Minneapolis till I was 13, 14, moved to Houston for 9 months. Then we moved to Kansas City because it was a school my parents wanted me to go to, was there since 84. In that music scene, tons of country, but it's all country covers. There's not original stuff. There were a few bands that were trying to do original stuff, but at that time, there wasn't the reaching out or the shadowing available to say, this is how we do it in Nashville, or this is how we do it over here. It was competitive as snot. Every band was vying for, we're going to blow those guys away. Oh, we're going to play better. We're going to have better songs. Competition in that town was rabid at that time. There were some killer original bands coming out at that time. A band I loved, Outhouse. Yes, I'm shouting out to Outhouse. Opened for Kiss for a few weeks on their first album. Then Cheap Trick. Don't know where it went wrong. Have no idea. Don't even want to guess. But they were just like, you know what? We're done. I don't know why. I care because I loved the music. The dudes are great dudes. But it was like, this is Kansas City. This is all we have to look forward to. Who mentored them? Who brought them in? Who taught them how to take care of the money if they're doing all this? And it was many times over, you would see a band. Shiner was another one. They're still out there now, but they were a little more cutting edge, a little more grinder, not thrash, but a deeper alternative, we'll call it. Had some killer stuff. Were approached by major labels. It just didn't go. So the country cover thing turned into originals, and that's when it started to grow. Fell apart. Worked for another guy where rock bands, you don't have to be in a location. They almost come to you in a way. And then you kind of, all right, we're going to visit the town. So I had been moving per se. I would live down here for a few months, still live in Kansas City with the family, the house, the stuff. Did that a few times. Then was just like, all right, I need a break as well. Took a couple of years, met up with some killer dudes around 2008. We wrote some amazing music together. And at that moment, I realized I do better collaboration. I do better when I'm somebody's right-hand man, or I can say, can we do it this way? Or if you did this and I did this, this feels better to me. And they could also say, I prefer this and this. And it worked between the two of us really, really, really well. And in the course of a year, we probably wrote 2 years, 35 songs, tried to demo, but we didn't have the budget. We just didn't have the money. So we didn't put it out anywhere. It's just all demos on our phones or, the mini disc. Remember mini discs?
I do.
Oh, and they had the little butterfly microphone. It was just about 1.5 inches wide, and it looked like two of these, but these vocal mics we're speaking to with the giant foam head were about that big. We just recorded on that, and that was how we tried to do it. And that's when I realized I've got to find a touring gig, a real thing. So I would start pressing, hey, Jay, do you know of anybody? Hey, do you know of any? All right, I'm going to go to Nashville again, try and find something. And the common, it's not a thread and it's not a mistake, but it is a click atmosphere here of you don't live here currently. We will not call you, and it will not happen. Well, LA called and I played with them for 10 years. And I didn't even leave Kansas City. I stayed in Kansas City that whole time and went around the world 8 times to Afghanistan, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, Malaysia, Philippines, Guam, Japan, China, all over, and never left Kansas City. So I was very, 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 very fortunate to get that gig, and thousands of people would like that gig.
Nashville has got a completely different mindset than the rest of the world.
It really does.
I lived in Southern California, and many of my touring acts were out of New York. They were out of San Francisco. They were out of Chicago. Yeah, they were out of L.A. too. But, you know, it was, can you get on a plane and fly to Atlanta and pick up this tour? Sure, when do I leave? You leave tonight. Okay, and that's what you did. Nashville, once again, well, I want to go on the road. Great. Do you live here? No. Okay, well, thanks. Because it's a different mindset. And I don't think that mold is ever going to break. I really don't.
I don't either. Even with the technology today.
Even post-COVID, that's not changing.
So then from there, transitioned out of that band. Well, fortunately, some buddies from touring 10 years with the previous band in the Gin Blossoms, they'd called several times and like, hey, Jesse's out tomorrow. He's sick. Can you fill in? Yes.
You just did that like last week, didn't
I did
you?
that last weekend.
Yeah.
Scotty's sick. Can you do that? Yes, I would love to. All right, we need 4 shows out of you here. Okay, great. And then the best one was, it was 11:45 on a Wednesday. We need you in Chicago at 7 o'clock tonight. The plane leaves at 4, and it'll be the third instrument will be bass this time. All right, let's do it. And that is something most of Nashville does have going for it, is a ton of people just willing to try anything in any format. I'll play with you at work. That's not going to work. Oh, I love it because roommate, his story was he worked at a small, tiny little Oklahoma music store. Moved to Nashville, was playing for some regional artists, some stuff that was picking up. His former customer, we'll call him, who's the drummer for one of the largest acts going right now. The drummer was the customer and remembered, oh, my buddy worked at this music store, called him up and said, hey, you want to come play bass for him? Oh, okay. Who's the artist? Well, it's this guy named Luke Combs. All right. Yeah. But, and he was just like, what do I do? And it's like, just come hang out with us. And that is even more essential nowadays, that the relationship. And that is also financially where you can go, I trust this guy with my money every time. I trust this guy with giving me better advice every time. I trust this musician. He's going to show up on time. So the list of things, hopefully I've learned, are first and foremost, if you're willing and available, then be willing and available. And if you start wavering on that, then it's probably time to move on.
Yeah.
In any way, in any form, because...
In any career.
Yeah. As Bob Lefsetz loved to read his blogs. Years ago I read, sometimes you just need to change the gig. So I did. I went and started to play bass. And I played for the former American Idol, whose songs I've loved, like the rock I want to play. I can move around. I can do this. I can do that. David Cook. And did, some certain things with bass that were foreign to me. What I had to do, because just wrist indicators of pain or whatever it was, I rotated and pulled an old trick that Ross Valerie from Journey would do. He took, instead of the normal low 4 strings, E, A, D, G, I would rotate the strings out and make it a 5-string with 4 strings. So now it became a B, a low B, E, A, D. So I could still play a 4-string bass, look like a 4-string bass, but get down in those notes because he plays a lot of things in drop D. Oh, that goes down to B. Foreign world, totally new concept because reading the fretboard was entirely different for me. And that right there said, okay, no matter what, I'm going to at least try something else. And honestly, I really need to try to be better with my money.
We can surely help you with that offline. Well, who you listening to? What's your favorite bands? You mentioned Kiss earlier, and
those were early. So weird enough, March 6th, 2020, was playing a Gin Blossoms show. Got done, flew home. World catches a cold, and everybody loses their mind. March 20th, 21st, 22nd, I'm not sure the exact date. This band releases an album, and I think, oh, I've heard of them. Oh, they're on Frontiers, which is putting out constant content. Bands don't make a lot of money, but they're able to go out and tour because the money is in touring now. It's in the live performance, and it's not that I'm trying to make more money. I'm just trying to make a base level because I love to tour. I love to play. So this band comes out with a new album, and I'm like, oh, I remember that band from 1990. And they had a pseudo hit, and they're Canadian. So I started listening to one song, I listened to another song, and I'm like, oh, dear Lord, I love this album. The band was called Harem Scarum. They're from Canada. And at the time, I don't know who they were on, didn't care for his voice at the time on that first album. So I listened to the one they released in 2020, Harem Scarum, changed the world. Changed mine. Like, again, certain guitar work, certain guitar plays became my new favorite guitar player, Pete Lesperance. I hope I'm saying your name right. I hate to butcher it, but the notes you play, amazing. Went back through the entire catalog of 20 plus albums, went back to the beginning and realized the second album they put out may be one of my favorite albums of all time. And it's like just willing to take that step. So Harem Scarum is what I listened to a lot of, which led me to a lot of the Frontiers band. Always listened, certain staples will be White Lion, White Snake, Extreme. Learned how to play guitar on those because I wasn't allowed to. And could just say, well, it's classical. Listen.
Yeah.
And, pull some wool over some people's eyes.
I won't go too deep into this, but Bob's an Extreme guy.
I love Extreme.
Okay.
And the new stuff they're coming out with right now? Oh, my gosh.
Please, yes. Just made a post yesterday because Nuno revealed something I could go as deep as I want on Nuno. I still never heard a certain aspect of his rig sets up and is like, oh, that's why. And other guitarists mock those things. But subconsciously, I realized I've been playing it that way with that gear the same way for the last 15 years and not known it. So Nuno, did you ever get to work with Nuno
No,
Extreme or anything?
I wish I could have.
Anybody close to that era or that kind of thing? Because if you are, we may have just, crossed a threshold of holding hands.
I'd have to think about that. My memory ain't as good as it used to be.
Okay.
But yeah.
All right. So Vito Bratta, White Lion. So, of course, Pete Lesperance from Harem Scarum. Like, literally, since 2020 has changed virtually my playing. I don't even explain it. Just certain aspects of the way I move now are like, oh, I didn't know I could do this. And it's happening. And the bass helped. Playing bass, that was several months, but it was great. And I got to sing, I got to dance, I got to jump around. And
Well, you're a basketball guy, too. And
very much. Oh, keep talking.
Well, and this is not my point with this comment, but I'll talk about something you mentioned a few minutes ago. The best ability is availability. That's a sports analogy. So if you want to be available to play, kind of like what you just said. But the best athletes, they make these kids nowadays just, you want to play baseball. You don't do anything else. But the best athletes in the long term play baseball, and then they play basketball, then they play football, or they wrestle or something else, and you develop all these different skill sets. Because I know that because I tried them all and was terrible at everything except ping pong. We talked about that once. Actually, I was a decent basketball player at one time, but I grew 6 inches after high school. Believe it or not, my game changed. I couldn't move like I used to. I was like Herman Munster, But anyway,
Donovan, thank you so much.
I appreciate the time
This
and the chocolate.
This was a great road we traveled down today.
Yes,
thank you.
Good. We went deep fast.
Yeah, we're going to do this again. Trust me.
Okay.
We're not done with you.
I'm going to invest in the chocolate budget. For
Well,
next time.
it's not hard. It's what, $7 for this mixed assortment of crackles
Really,
and
you
Butterfingers.
haven't bought any lately, have you?
No, because I come to places like this and just eat theirs.
Yeah.
But I thank you for all of it, the time and the interest, because we all love to talk.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound designed by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Fuson.